You walk into a coffee shop you've never been to before. A stranger behind the counter smiles at you. You smile back. You hand them your card without a second thought. You trust them with your money, your name, sometimes even your address. You've known this person for 4 seconds. But the real answer to why you do this is far stranger than simple politeness. It reaches back through hundreds of thousands of years into a world where a stranger's face could mean the difference between life and death. Your brain is still running that ancient program, right now, in a coffee shop. Think about how fast it happens. Someone walks past you on the street. Before you've even registered their clothes or their height, your brain has already made a decision. Safe or not safe. Friend or threat. This judgment takes about 1/10 of a second. 1/10 of a second. Faster than you can blink. Psychologist Alexander Todorov at Princeton spent years studying this exact moment. He showed people photographs of faces for just a fraction of a second, then asked them to rate trustworthiness, competence, aggression. The answers were remarkably consistent across different viewers, different ages, different backgrounds, different cultures. Almost everyone agreed on which faces looked trustworthy and which didn't. That's strange, isn't it? You've never met these people. You know nothing about their lives, their choices, their character, and yet your brain has already written a verdict. Where does that verdict come from? To answer that, you have to go back. Not just decades, not even centuries. You have to go back to a time before cities, before writing, before agriculture. A time when humans lived in small bands, maybe 20 to 50 people, moving across open landscapes. In that world, you knew everyone. Every face in your group was familiar. You'd seen it 1,000 times, in 1,000 moods, in firelight and daylight and rain. So what happened when a face you didn't recognize appeared? That face was an event. It was data. It could mean a new ally, a trading partner, someone bringing food or information. Or it could mean danger, a rival group, a threat to your territory, your family, your life. Anthropologists studying small-scale societies today, like Napoleon Chagnon's work among the Yanomami in the Amazon, found something consistent. Encounters between strangers from different groups were treated with extreme caution, sometimes hostility. The stakes of getting it wrong were enormous. So evolution did what it does best. It built a shortcut. Your brain didn't have time to gather a stranger's life story before deciding how to react. It needed an instant read. And the fastest data available was the face. Width of the jaw, shape of the eyebrows, curve of the mouth, distance between the eyes. These features became signals. Rightly or wrongly, your ancestors' brains learned to associate certain facial structures with certain traits. A face that resembled an expression of anger, even at rest, got coded as a threat. A face with features resembling a smile, even when neutral, got coded as safe. Here's the twist. This system isn't actually reading character, it's reading shape. Researcher Nicholas Oosterhoff, working alongside Todorov, found that trust judgments are heavily influenced by how closely a neutral face resembles an angry or happy expression. Not by anything to do with the person's actual personality, just geometry, just the resting architecture of a face, which means, in a very real sense, you are judging strangers based on bone structure. Not honesty, not kindness, bone structure. And it gets stranger still. This snap judgment doesn't just sit quietly in the background, it actively shapes what happens next. Studies on what's sometimes called the halo effect show that people rated as more trustworthy or attractive are also assumed to be more competent, more honest, even more intelligent, often with zero evidence. Employers spend less time reviewing resumes from people with trustworthy faces. Voters favor political candidates whose faces score higher on competence ratings, sometimes regardless of policy positions. Juries have been shown, in controlled studies, to render different verdicts based partly on defendants' facial structure. One split-second judgment made by a brain built for a world of 20 people is now influencing job interviews, elections, and courtrooms. Think about that for a moment. The exact mental tool that helped your ancestors avoid an ambush near a watering hole is now quietly involved in deciding who gets hired, who gets believed, who gets convicted. But here's where it gets even. Studies on familiarity show that the more often you see a face, even a face that initially seemed unremarkable or even slightly off-putting, the more your trust in it tends to increase. This is sometimes called the mere exposure effect, first studied extensively by psychologist Robert Zionk. Repetition rewires the verdict. This explains something you've probably felt yourself. A coworker who seemed cold or intimidating on day 1 becomes warm and familiar by week 3. Nothing about their face changed. What changed is how many times your brain has now filed that face under known instead of unknown. Known used to mean safe, and your brain still runs on that logic. So why does any of this matter to you, scrolling through your phone on an ordinary day? Because you are now living in a world your ancient trust system was never designed for. For most of human history, you encountered maybe a few dozen new faces in your entire life. Today, you might see hundreds of unfamiliar faces before lunch, on your commute, on your screen, in advertisements, in videos, on profiles of people you'll never meet. Your brain is still issuing tenth of a second verdicts on every single one. Marketers know this. That's part of why brands invest heavily in choosing the right face for an advertisement, a face engineered to trigger that ancient trust signal instantly. Online, profile photos with certain expressions and angles get rated as more trustworthy, and people act accordingly, clicking, buying, swiping, often without consciously noticing why. Even the faces you don't see shape your decisions. Studies on algorithmically generated faces, used in some research to create faces that don't belong to any real person, found that people still apply trust judgments to them. The brain doesn't require a real human behind the face. It just needs the shape. So the next time you meet someone's eyes for the first time, in a meeting, on a date, in a shop, notice the speed of it. Notice that verdict arriving before a single word has been spoken. That verdict isn't really about them. Not yet. It's an echo. A message sent from a small group of humans standing in tall grass, scanning the horizon for a shape that might be a friend or might be a threat, with only a heartbeat to decide. You walk into a coffee shop you've never been to before. A stranger smiles at you, and somewhere in that instant, a piece of the ancient world reaches forward and decides, for you, that you're safe.